Hello, Gumshoes. Welcome to another Murderous Heart Live. We have a lot to cover tonight, so I am just going to jump right in and trust the technology. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. Caveat, this, as I mentioned before, okay, we have some. This is going to be a pretty intense live, probably one of the more intense lives I've done. At least it was intense for me to prepare this because we're going to be talking about kids, but yeah. So just keep that in mind. Absolutely prioritize your mental health. If this gets to be too much, just jump. Anyway, I had to do that with Dateline. Okay, without further ado, I figured out how to get rid of the circular frame, but anyway. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Just 1 second here. Such a some notes. Let's see. I don't know if I'm missing it or what, but you usually have this option to see your notes. Show speaker notes. Okay, great. Okay, well, I don't see speaker notes, but that's okay. Hopefully I remember everything. All right, so obviously tonight I'm going to be talking about the evolution of Chad's view on murdering the kids. I think that there's a perspective that he was just all in from the beginning. And as I started to dive into some of the details, and as I started looking things up, because I mentioned in my last live, I've been building this search tool that allows me to search for things across the 2 different trials. So I've been finding new details or like dates for different events and syncing them up with my timeline, and new insights have kind of jumped out at me. So then I just took a deep dive into this issue. But one thing I want to say from the jump is that by talking about his evolution, I am not in any way excusing where he ended up. I mean, ultimately, he ended up being all in on the murder of children, but it was a process. Whereas for Lori, there was no process. Okay, if you haven't signed the petition for Arizona to police to investigate Joe's death, I'd be grateful if you are so inclined. bit.ly/justice4 Okay, trigger warning. Basically, this entire presentation, pretty much most of the presentation, is a trigger warning. So I'm not going to repetitively give trigger warnings. So you've been warned. Okay, for a lot of these slides, I am just going to be reading the interactions, like the text interactions, but all of the receipts are on my timeline, which you can find by going to bit.ly/JT-timeline for JJ Tylee. Timeline, and I'll cover all the dates, so that will make it easy for you to find all the references there. Okay, first of all, let me lay some foundation. John Pryor would be so proud. what are we talking about with death percentages? Because this presentation is going to really kind of hyper focus on these death percentages that Chad came up with. He had a number of different metrics he used. He also had like a trust rating. He had light and dark ratings. But for this presentation, I'm really going to focus on these death percentages, what they mean, what they meant to them. And I think there was at least one time in the trial, and I mean, no disrespect to the person who testified, but I think the person who testified actually got a detail wrong. And I think it was former FBI agent Douglas Hart. Well, at least this is my opinion. I'll make my case. I think by the end, I will present a pretty compelling case about these death percentages. But I agreed with him when he said the closer a person got to zero, the more imminent, or, the closer they were to death. But he said there was a rating once for JJ where he said, well, for this particular rating, is actually the higher number is like the higher the number, the closer he was to death. And I'm going to present that I just don't think that's the case. And I think the assumption is that Lori and Chad were always on the same page and always in the far left murder lane, when I actually don't think that they were. But Chad sent Lori a text at one point. This was pretty early on. He said, anyway, this is what the chart that checks what percentage mortals are still in their body. Not the best writer. It works for my friend's wife who died, my neighbor, George Bush, Stanley, etc. Okay. So we're going to just go chronologically and through this, and we're really going to focus on July 18th onward, because as Doug Hart noted, that was the first explicit reference they made to death percentages in reference to the children. I actually think it was their first reference to death percentages in general. But in order to understand some of the context, we need to hit on a few highlights before July 18th, because some of these things will kind of circle back on, or at minimum, I think that they'll provide some understanding as to where Lori's head was, and then also where Chad's head was. So on July 9th, and a lot of this we've already covered, but I try not to ever operate under the assumption that someone watching one of these videos has watched all of my videos. They're marathon videos. I would never watch a 2+ hour video, but a lot of you do. So I commend you for your commitment to this case. So we're going to go back to July 9th. First of all, I just want to point out the Cox clan was circling the wagons. Now, at this point, Lori had lots of support. And that's what I'm going to be presenting with these like prior to July 18th dates. So in fact, when Melanie Gibb had texted her saying, hey, I want to come over, Lori responded saying, all my family and the kids are here, so it's chaos right now. In other words, no, I don't want you to come over. Everyone's over here. It's chaos. I mean, I think they were just all abuzz. They, have at least, I don't know, at least like been a somewhat united front in claiming that Lori was afraid for her life. No, none of them thought, oh, you know what? This is really scary. Let me go with you to the courthouse to get an injunction against Charles, or a restraining order. Let's call the police. Like he has sent you threatening texts, which he did. But they were vague enough. The police wouldn't have done anything. But here her family was like all in. And this is a Cox family tradition to just circle the wagons, especially in like to be a cohesive unit against an outsider, like generally like someone who married in. So Joe, Charles, Brandon, etc. The next day, they're running reconnaissance and they're saber rattling. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but again, it's important context. Lori found out about the potential intervention on July 9th. This intervention was ostensibly Charles and her brother Adam staging an intervention. They were supposed to pull in the bishop and get her temple recommend revoked to to nudge her like toward repentance and thinking twice about what she was doing. So she reached out to Alex Cox, Melani Boudreaux, and Summer Shiflett to warn them of the elaborate plan that Adam and Charles had. First of all, let me say, before the FOIA docs, like the really big FOIA document dump came out, I had gone through, this was the affidavit of probable cause, and I had gone through and unredacted it. But then the entire affidavit of probable cause was left unredacted in the FOIA docs. So anyway, so all of these unredactions, these are actual, like I verified them because obviously I wouldn't have been able to unredact an entire sentence. Adam and his son Zach were picked up at the airport on July 10th by Adam's mother. Summer provided Lori with updates regarding Adam's whereabouts and asked Lori if she wanted to run interference. Lori told Summer that she was trying to figure it out. Summer commented, "I will kill him myself if that is the case." We don't know what she was responding to, just that she was, I mean, obviously this is saber rattling. I don't think Summer had plans to actually go and kill Charles herself. But Lori responded, "No, I need you safe." And then the police report. This is hilarious. This will never not be hilarious to me. There is no indication who Summer was talking about killing. Like, this is the eve of the murder of Charles Vallow. You know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and say, like they were just talking about, hey, you want us to run reconnaissance with Adam and Charles, and then Summer responds to something that she's really upset about and offers to kill him herself. Another point is she had, this was like in October, Lori set her up and in this text exchange and said, where was Edgar? Edgar was Summer's side piece. She was married. She's still married as far as I know, but she had this side piece, Edgar, and Summer succumbed to more saber rattling, saying that, basically saying he was a hitman, but he like never misses or, makes things look like an accident. So Edgar, who looked like a toddler, is, we're supposed to believe, this skilled hitman. Anyway, so, all right, moving along. Another indicator that the family lent their undying support was, and I just noticed this really today. I was looking for something else, and Lori had said, "Oh no, this is one I've already covered. This, I think it's the next one." But she had said, "I want you to know that I 100% support you." This was late January. This was when Lori and Charles had their big fight, and Lori, Tylee, and Melanie Gibb went to Gilbert Police. They helped her evade a mandatory pickup order, and one of the police officers assessed her himself and said she didn't seem crazy to him. And they really helped her out. In fact, I just found out this week that when someone from Chandler Police reached out to Gilbert Police about the pickup order, the person he talked to at Gilbert Police said they didn't even save the pickup order. And that officer actually lied to this other one and said Charles was just like, he was just upset about the money. And then the person who was writing up the report, I forget which detective it was the one who recently retired, and there's this question of, is he a firearms expert? So whichever one he is. But he noted that that was only one of the issues that Charles had brought up. So they didn't even save the pickup order. Anyway, okay, so that's the background. And Summer said, I know you have help from the other side. I know you are being inspired to know what to do, and you are prepared to do your mission. I support you. I love you. I am here for you. I mean, even Janice was like appealed to Alex and said, like, you would be upset too. Like, I forget exactly how she put it, but she was like, she took all of his stuff and hid his truck. Like, you would be upset too. So even Janice was like, I can't really get behind this. But, Summer was like, I know you have help from the other side and you're being inspired. Doesn't matter how crazy you are, how cruel you are, even to your own son. I know you're being inspired and you're just prepared to do your mission. This was the new piece. So Summer told investigators that Alex was excommunicated from the church twice because he could not live by the standards of the church. Alex had a difficult time with sexual behaviors. Summer even knew that because of this addiction, he went to South America a couple of times to look for, quote, his future wife. I don't think he was looking for a wife. And I would be willing to wager quite a bit of money that he probably went to South America more than a couple times. However, a couple years before his death, Alex became devoted to the church again and wanted to be rebaptized. Summer mentioned the patriarchal blessing that was given to Alex, and she stated that Alex felt like he was out of the darkness now. So I was looking for something else and came across that. Like, it's one of those things, like, I read it, but it just didn't really hit pay dirt at that time. But that, like, what she said about, like, how, Alex felt like he was out of the darkness now. I mean, it sounded a lot like Lori's Hallelujah cover. And I mean, I use the word cover very, very loosely. It's not even a cover. But she had said it started out with Julie Rowe and it turned on the light, and he was changed forever in an instant. He started small to build the light. Darkness went away at night. So the only patriarchal blessing that we know about came from Chad Daybell, unless there was another patriarchal blessing that we don't know about. It sounds like she's like lending credulity to this patriarchal blessing that Alex, that Chad gave Alex. Okay, and I've talked about this before, but on the day of the shooting, like, Summer doesn't call Lori. She doesn't text Lori that we know of. Hey, are you okay? I'm so worried. Please call me. Did he leave? Or, it looks like they didn't even have a plan in place. Like, supposedly Lori was telling everyone that Charles was going to kill her, but Melanie Gibb was like, oh yeah, I didn't hear from her for 4 days. I found out, that she didn't die, but she's supposed to be like one of her best friends. And Summer, it appears, doesn't check in with Lori. She's checking in with Alex, but she's not like, even with checking in with Alex, she's not like, oh my gosh, is Lori safe? Is everything okay? She just texted on the plane, anything yet. So it sure sounded like they all knew that this was supposed to happen. Oh, and then this was new. I was going through, like I said, I'm going through this like search app, and I have a whole list of videos that I need to capture. But one of the details that I saw in there in one of the trials is that Melanie, her niece, called Charles' cell phone the day of the shooting. It was like around 10 in the morning. So it sounds like what happened was she tried to get a hold of Lori. She couldn't get a hold of Lori. She has her own impulse control issues, just like her Aunt Lolo. And so she probably, tried to call Lori, and Lori was probably still at the police department. And maybe Melanie thought, oh, she's just not picking up. I'm just going to call Charles. So obviously she wasn't calling to chat with Charles. So by calling Charles' phone, she inadvertently gave away that she knew from Lori that she had taken Charles' phone. So anyway, when I find that, I'll look for that this weekend if one of my mods can remind me and put that up on the channel. It was crazy. I mean, it was very short, but just so strange. Okay, so then moving ahead 3 days after the shooting, Chad scheduled a flight to Arizona for July 24th to the 26th. This was new to me. Okay.
Turning to the next lines in Raleigh time, but on line 2915 from July 14th, 2019. Could you please read what's included in slide 13?
Yes. Line 2915, text from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. Hanging in there, but really missing you too. Please find out the name of Mel's campout in Utah. I have no intention of going, but I feel it is our avenue to get together, whether she is still here or not. Line 2914, from Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell. Zion's family camp. Mel speaks Wednesday night and Dave speaks Thursday night. Shelley M. is their main speaker. Eye roll. Line 2913, from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. Well, that should work for me to get away, though. I spoke at it 2 years ago, which is when I first met Mel. What time do you fly out tomorrow? Line 2913, from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. My trip to speak at the camp, July 24th through 26th, has been approved and is now on the calendar.
Why did you include that series of text between Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow in your summary?
During the course of the investigation, we discovered travel that Chad Daybell undertook July 24th through the 26th, where he flew to Arizona to visit Lori Vallow. This is the story that he came up with to justify his travel.
Did the texting continue on that 14th?
It did.
Can you please identify in reading of the record what is contained on slide 14?
Line 2889, from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. I need so badly to just gently kiss you for hours. Line 2888, from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. It would likely lead to other activities. Line 2887, from Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell. Likely or luckily. Line 2886, from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. It would luckily lead to nakedness.
So this text exchange between Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow occurred on July 14th around 8:30 at night. Okay, and that's of 2019.
Yes.
Okay. Just about 3 days after Charles Vallow was killed.
Correct.
Okay, so that was new, And like, I just didn't realize that he had flown out to Arizona so soon after, after Charles was killed, or that they had planned it just 3 days after he was killed. Okay. Again, this is just like leading up to what we're actually going to focus on. But let me make sure. Yeah. Okay. And then the next day, that Lori and Colby flew to Houston, and I've talked about this before. I want to make clear, I'm not bringing this up just to keep harping on the fact that they went and cleared out Charles' apartment. I even thought about do I include these details? Because just thinking, one of the things that I genuinely really feel for Colby on is, none of us are batting 1,000, but, for him, all of probably his biggest mistakes are, out in the public purview. And that has to be really, really painful. So, but it does play into what I think was Lori's mindset that drove her to this point. There were a few text messages that Lori sent to Chad that I just found out about, a couple weeks ago when I started researching this, that they were just, I didn't think anything in this case could surprise me, but they did. And so I was just trying to unwind that ball of yarn. How did she get to that point? And some of these details, I think speak to that. So I'll make the point after this one. July 16th. So they worked through the night according to Colby. And then the 16th, they flew back. They put all of the things that they wanted in Charles' truck and parked it at the airport. And then Lori had Alex fly out and drive Charles' truck back to Phoenix. And but Colby kept Bailey. So on the 16th, instead of Lori bringing Bailey home to JJ, she sent him with Colby, and that has always kind of mystified me, and I think it plays into this as well, because I mentioned something to my daughter just a few days ago. I was like, this is one of those pieces that it just doesn't make sense for Lori to keep Bailey from JJ, because it would have made her life easier. I mean, at the same time, JJ lost his dad and his dog, and he and Bailey were inseparable. And he didn't even know that his dad was dead. We know that a teacher had said something to him about his dad being in heaven, and JJ got really upset and said, my dad's not in heaven, he's on a business trip. And so his world was just kind of turned upside down. But I think at this point, I think the Cox family thought there's going to be a big payout, and it's very much in keeping with Lori's MO to keep everyone on the hook with these promises of, money, maybe a trip. I mean, who knows what, but, she had gone and moved back in with Charles specifically to get him to, make sure that she was the beneficiary, and all of the money would go toward her, which it did work. He did change the life insurance back from Kay to, back to Lori, but then at some point changed it back to Kay. We don't know that date, as far as I know. So I think at this point, not only is it a Cox family tradition to circle the wagons and be all in, all for one for all, kind of a mentality, But I think that they were also thinking like, there's going to be a payout. And I think that that was part of the reason that there was this celebration the night that Charles was killed, because their next door neighbor was interviewed and she talked about the pool party. We had already heard about the pool party at that point because Charles and Lori's landlord had come into a Facebook group that I was in and had mentioned it, that he heard from the neighbors that there was a pool party, which of course, that just sent everyone into a spiral trying to figure out who was at the pool party. But the neighbor who was interviewed, she kind of rounded out the perspective. She said there was loud music, and it was a boisterous party. And anyway, so I think that was part of what was driving this, camaraderie and like this, almost like this allegiance. Well, not almost. It was an allegiance to Lori. But then July 18th, all hell broke loose. The rug was pulled out from under Lori, and this was the day that Lori notoriously found out that she wasn't the beneficiary. She sent Chad a text. I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to? Brandon or probably Kay? He left nothing for JJ, as if like that was her main concern. Chad, wow, that's terrible. There is no way to find out. Lori, I might be able to see when I get his computer on Sunday. Now, Sunday, what she was referencing was that must have been the day that Alex came back with all of Charles' stuff, I'm assuming. Anyway, I could check, and this was a typo in their exchange. The email sent to the insurance company, it will show change of beneficiary. He must have done it recently. And then they had a whole bunch of back and forth. And then, she summarized with, so I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. They can't tell me to who, of course, but it's done. I'll still get the $4,000 a month from Social Security. So I think that this I think that this date is off. So I don't know if the representative she spoke to didn't know that Charles had changed it back to her. I believe that was in April. And then changed it again. Maybe she just didn't want to share all of that. Okay. So later that day, we don't know how much later, but former agent Doug Hart was reading the text messages in chronological order, which I really appreciated. But Chad, and he noted that this was their first explicit mention of intention to murder kids. So Chad said, I have been instructed to focus my efforts on Hillary, so I will. Hillary was Tylee's entity, like that was her, the dark spirit that had overtaken her and caused her to become a zombie. They're not creative in their choices. Lori, okay, find out her percentage for me and JJ's. So already Chad, he says, now it's not a backbone, but it's like, oh, look at that. It's like a single vertebra, like I don't know what led up to this discussion, but he says, I have been instructed to focus my efforts on Hillary. So he's kind of saying, all right, I'll rate Tylee a dark spirit, but I haven't been instructed to focus on JJ. But then Lori, she doesn't care about that. She's like, find out her percentage for me and JJ's. So Chad, being the dork that he was, he says she is at 0.13. So I think this was just his land grab at credibility. Like, oh, she's not a 0, but man, she is just a sliver away from death. I turned up the pain to 10 and placed a spiritual virus in her. Then he said but he was talking about JJ, so that's why I put it in square brackets. JJ is at 99.99. So this was the point that Douglas Hart had said that with JJ, it was the higher number that referenced, like he was also close to death. But I don't think that was the case. I think that this was basically Chad saying, we're not touching JJ. He's at 99.99, so like there's only a 0.01% chance that, I'll change my mind on JJ. Raphael visited him and told him to follow Amy into the light. We don't know who Amy is, but he said, I also assured him that James would love and take care of his mommy, which he will with all his heart and soul. Lori, that is sweet. I miss you desperately. Okay, so, and I also felt, I was confused by, okay, why would he rate JJ at a 99.99? But then he's talking about, like, telling JJ, Raphael visited JJ and told him to follow Amy into the light, and that James, would love and take care of his mommy. So he's still talking in endearing terms. Like when he's talking about kids who have turned dark, he is not endearing. I mean, he is, again, I think it's saber rattling. I think he was, think he was just like, Alex will take care of all the heavy lifting. But I think Lori was primarily focused on getting rid of her kids, but Chad was primarily focused on getting into Lori's pants. Okay, so obviously this conversation followed immediately on the heels of the insurance discussion. So it seems like Lori, now they were already talking about like Tylee, was a dark spirit. That was as soon as they had met. In fact, yeah. So that was like within days of meeting Lori. But I don't believe the reference to Raphael telling JJ to follow Amy into the light. I don't think that this was a harbinger to murder. I just don't. I think at this point he was like, yeah, Tylee is a no-brainer. She goes. She's a dark spirit. But JJ, and even his light rating was very high. In fact, it was almost as high as Lori's. So to me, again, I will continue to make this point. This is not the only hook I'm going to hang this hat on. There are other messages. I thought, this is really, really strange. I'm not sure what to make of this. But anyway, but I think at this point he was like, yeah, Tylee can go, not JJ. So I think that there was something in Chad that was like, I don't know, I just can't go as far as saying a little special needs boy is a dark spirit or marked for death. Now, part of the reason I think that Lori is so desperate, as you'll see, to get him to change his position on that is I personally suspect that she was afraid that if Chad actually came into her life and into her world where she had this teenage daughter who was traumatized, who probably knew that she had murdered, two men in, a period of just a little more than a year. And there were already issues between her and Tylee. And then JJ was very high needs. He was very energetic and stuff. So I think Lori wanted to be like this, goddess in this, I don't know, like trophy wife kind of thing. And I suspect that she was afraid that if he actually saw the chaos of her day-to-day life, he'd be like, no, I'm good, thanks. Okay, so at some point on that same day, Chad says, "You are so adorable, beautiful, wonderful, heavenly, luscious, and angelic. So many divine attributes rolled into one dynamic, desirable package. I want you even more desperately than you want me." So he's recognizing, like, you're out of my league. I'm punching above my weight class. I want you even more desperately than you want me. And then he follows up with the infamous, "Just grab me by the storm," which was his junk, "and I will follow you to the ends of the universe." Now, he just waxed eloquent. He just poured out, all of his heart. Lori was like, "When might that be?" Chad, "Wednesday evening," and then repeatedly and gloriously until Friday. So he's referencing his upcoming trip. This is the 18th, and he was due to fly out in less than a week. Lori replied, "And then what?" And then Lori replied again. This was a separate text. Back to crying and saying goodbye, and then back to the box. Chad, "This trip to Utah had a lot of finality to it. I was told extreme changes are coming for me and to Utah. I welcome them both." So I don't know what Utah had to do with any of this. I'm sure Lori did not care about any changes coming to Utah, but I was wondering what he was talking about. So I searched in my tool for all references in the trials to Utah and found out Chad was in Springville, Utah the day Charles was murdered. So at one point they picked his GPS up. It was like they just said just outside of Salt Lake City, and then a little bit later in two separate testimony, this was, the guy said he was in Springville, Utah, which I believe is where they had moved from. I believe they lived in Springville before they moved to Fremont County. Anyway, so I don't know what he was doing there, but he was in Utah, and so that's what he was referencing. Okay, so July 19th, this is the next day. Colby returns JJ's dog. So this is the same reference. Colby said he and Lori stayed one night, arriving 7:15, working all through the night, and then returning to Phoenix on 7:16. While in Houston, Colby and Lori gathered a lot of personal property to include Apple Mac desktop computers, Charles clothing, and that was probably Joshua's, a service dog, a black-colored golden retriever poodle named Bailey. And then they talked about, loading up the F-150. And there was another reference. I didn't include it in here, but he had also said that Lori told him she was planning to be married soon, and Colby told the officers who were interviewing him, this was after the welfare check, that he said he was furious and said, "I can't believe you would bring another dad into JJ and Tylee's life and stuff." So he knew she was going to be married, but then when he testified, I just found this looking for something else. He said that he didn't know she was going to be married. He thought that she was talking about like spiritually. So take that for what it's worth. But it does seem, now we don't know when Colby found out that Lori wasn't getting the life insurance money. So I don't want to be unfair, but it looks like already this was quite possibly the first sign to Lori that she was losing some of this frenetic support she had from her family, because here Colby and Kelsey had kept Bailey for, he said, several days. That's why I estimated the 19th, because he took Bailey the 16th. But it appears that, he may have found out that she wasn't going to receive the life insurance money. And then he was like, come get your dog. Because otherwise, it just doesn't make sense why they were ever willing to take Bailey. Okay, so the next day, July 20th, Chad and Lori target Blake. This is Blake Boudreaux. This is Brandon and Melanie's son, who Douglas Hart, former FBI agent Douglas Hart, had said that they estimated him to be between 3 and 4 at the time that he was targeted by them. So, Lori, what is Blake's percentage? 2 question marks. Lori again. He drew 3 crosses on the wall in his bedroom. We just finished painting over them. Lori, like he was marking it for the dark side to find him. Chad, Blake is at 7. So not as low as Tylee, but on a scale of 0 to 100, this is dangerously low in his perverse world. And then it gets worse. He says, I took my sword of light and sliced his aura vertically in several places. You should be able to now rip and burn it. Chad, I also decreased his pain tolerance to 1% and greatly increased his pain. His desire to depart is at 80%. So this was just like another measure he had. There was a death percentage, but then there was also this desire to depart. He referenced that even with Tammy, close to the time of her murder. Now, I started questioning, like, why? Like, Lori was pretty focused on wanting, Chad to share these death percentages of her kids. Why is one of Melanie's kids being brought in at this point? Now, I'm moving into the conjecture lane, but it appears that, I'll just share it as a theory. I have a theory. I suspect that when Lori found out that she wasn't receiving this money, now we've become so familiar with that fact, we can kind of become anesthetized to just the shock and the horror of it for Lori, because getting that money was absolutely critical to her plan. It was critical to, for her and Chad to be able to do, I think she just pictured like this life of luxury, and they would just fly around to all these conferences, and they would live in Hawaii, and and she would continue to enjoy this unquestioning support of her family, her friends, and then she doesn't get the money, and now she's only going to have $4,000 a month, which is a far cry from the life she enjoyed with Charles and also with Joe. So this was a really big change for her. So it just made me wonder, and I think I make a point somewhere in, I just wondered if they began to see Melanie as their cash cow or like a bailout, because we don't know when exactly when in July Melanie and Brandon decided to divorce, or Melanie filed for divorce, but it was sometime in July. So sometime in this whole mix, Melanie, files for a divorce, and so it just appears to me that like Lori and Melanie started to scheme, and Melanie wanted Brandon gone because, that would be financially beneficial to her. He only had, I think, $200,000 life insurance. So people assumed that he had this $1 million life insurance plan. He didn't. He had 200,000. But they were also partners in a business, and they had the house. So, when they did, divorce and settle, they made quite a bit of money. I think she walked away with something like $300,000. But anyway, but I think they thought, it would be a lot more. And so it seems like, originally maybe Lori and Melani were talking about them, killing Brandon. But then at some point, I suspect Melani was like, you know what, I'm going to be a single mom. And she decided that Blake needed to go. So, because I do not believe for a second that Chad was initiating these ratings. Like, Lori was the one going to him, asking him, but it was like she was leading from behind, because, and you'll see with her persistence, she's not inquiring, like just inquiring minds want to know. She is pushing him toward these things. So they the only one he really pushes back on is JJ. Like, Tylee, he's totally fine with. Blake, I don't know what conversation preceded this, but he's like, he's at 7, and he did all of these weirdo things to get Blake ready for death. And so I don't think that Melani was like, no, not Blake. I think she was working with them. Oh, yeah, and this was the reference to, this was from the first FOIA document dump. And when I talk about FOIA, it's just an acronym for the Freedom of Information Act. So reporters or other people can also request these documents, and then police and prosecutors, like, they have to go through and decide what gets redacted and things like that. But and that's how we got a lot of this information. But it said, despite V1, that I assume stood for victim 1. They were trying to keep his name out of it. And I think that this was in I think it was in a search warrant. Like, I think it was part of the boilerplate for a search warrant. But it said, despite V1's attempts to prove Lori's prophecy was untrue, so she had told Melani that Brandon was gay, that, like, God told her Brandon was gay, and then Melani was like, oh, I saw this. It was like some kind of, like, when I think the detective asked her why she thought he was gay, she said that, like, she saw this gauge, and it was like, I don't know. It was some kind of scale, and apparently Brandon tipped the scale, and she saw videos of him dancing at a work event. Okay, so despite V1's attempts to prove Lori's prophecy was untrue, Melani maintained Lori's conviction and filed for divorce in July 2019. So again, we don't know when, unless I come across that in by searching. I haven't looked for that. Okay. So that was the 20th that they were talking about Blake. And now the 21st, this is the next day. I mean, this is how fast things are moving. Melani and Lori are scheming about life insurance. So we all found this out. I think this was before the trial. Yeah, I think this was in the FOIA docs. But Melani sent Lori a text message. You should get a life insurance policy on JJ, Tylee, and you. Because after Charles, we see that anything can happen. She meant to say if. It's in the Lord's will. So, now, do I think that these people actually believed this stuff? No, I don't. I don't think. In fact, by the time I finished this analysis, I was like, I don't think Lori is nearly as delusional as people say. She might be delusional about a few things, but I think she and Melani Gibb and all, Zulema, all of them, Chad, I think they all knew that it was absolute BS. But here was a new piece of information that I found in just like searching these transcripts. Lori searched for life insurance policies for kids that same day. So Melanie's like, hey, you know what? You should really look into getting life insurance, because I think in Melanie's mind is like, if your kids are going to die anyway, you might as well benefit financially. Then Lori searched for Gerber life policy, life insurance for children, the grow up plan. Now, I suspect this wasn't her first search. I talked a little bit about this in my last live. So just having worked in the search industry, typically when someone first starts a search, they start with more general keywords like life insurance policies for kids, things like that. And then the more they learn, the more the specific their queries or their search terms become. So I suspect she was pretty far down the what we call a conversion funnel by this point, because she was looking for a very specific plan. So of course I looked up that plan, and you can buy a policy for a child ages 14 days to 14 years old. So Tylee was already too old for her to get this particular policy. And I think in Lori's mind, Chad was clearly opposed to killing JJ. So I assume that she decided there was no benefit to buying a policy at that time. Because at that time, JJ's death percentage was still at 99.99%. So I think if his had been at 7%, I think she probably would have made the plunge. Okay, so the next day, that Lori and Chad have this interaction where she seems to be kind of annoyed about the things aren't moving fast enough. So I'll just read the exchange, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. So Chad said, there are 272 threes left, and none of them have occupied a body before. I really don't think that Lori cared about any of this. They are down to their last reserves. I'm glad I caught Elroy. I feel he was aiming to hide out and then get into JJ. So clearly Chad watched a lot of Jetsons as a kid. Excuse me, trying to remember to drink more. Okay, Lori replies, good morning, missing you, didn't sleep much. So she goes into this, martyr mode, didn't sleep much, need you to check JJ. Weird stuff happened in the middle of the night. It's like they distracted us with Blake. And then she said, just dropped off JJ, cleared the school, and placed him in a shield of protection, and more kissy emojis. So a couple of points I'll make here. One of the things that I noticed is whenever she is nudging him about JJ, about like his death percentage, she dials up the intimate, like kind of sexual or romantic, if you want to call it, emojis. And she's like, there's a very strange power struggle between them going on, because I will make the case, I absolutely think that Lori was conducting the orchestra. She was the leader. Chad was like, grab me by the storm. I'll follow you, wherever. And we'll see another example of where more examples of where he really acquiesces to her. But it at least at this point, it seems like she's like, okay, could we just kind of refocus here? We need to focus on JJ. Yeah, okay. I already know you're definitely cool with Tylee being dark, and very close to going, and Blake, he's close enough, but Lori doesn't really benefit from Blake. Maybe, she'll get a finder's fee for helping Melanie, and even like green lighting this murder, but Blake isn't standing between her and Chad. Like, he's not getting in the way of her relationship with Chad. I think in Lori's mind, JJ absolutely would, as would Tylee. But Tylee, presented other risks as well. Okay, so Chad doesn't answer this request until July 30th, which was after they, he flew out to Arizona and he had a good old time. So I think he's like, I don't want to ruin this trip, so I'm just not going to touch this right now. Okay, so July 24th to the 26th, Chad is in Arizona. I'm actually not going to play this. You can play it, but he flew up there. That was the main point. Let me see. Yeah, and I'd already talked about how he made that plan 3 days after Charles was killed. Okay, inching forward, July 26th. Melanie now thinks Brighton is dark. So Brighton is her oldest child. So they had a boy, then a girl. The girl was dark. Then another boy. That was Blake, and he was dark. And then another girl. And the bookends, Braxton and Brees, they were fine. Like, they weren't ever in danger that we know of. It was her two middle kids. Okay. Oops, I have Chad twice. So Chad, how are things at home? Lori, I think they had been talking about, I assume she's talking about Tylee. But she says she's fine. Need you to check JJ. So she's like, whatever. We're not talking about Tylee because Tylee is already secured as dark and marked for destruction. So here she circles back again. Need you to check JJ. She said he was calm and he watched movies all day, which he would never do. And then here we have the chaser of missing you and 2 lips emojis. So, they had just had, she had just put out from July 24th to the 26th. Now it's the 26th. He's back in Idaho, and she's like, okay, let's revisit this. I need you to check JJ. And then, again, it's something else. Like, I mean, these kids, they couldn't win for losing. Like, Tylee was, considered like switched because she was sweet and cleaned her room. Now here's JJ. He was calm and he watched movies all day, which he would never do. And Chad, he's still protecting JJ. He's like, missing you too. It is still JJ. I'm told she is lying about him being calm and watching movies. So, he blocks her again. So then Lori changes the subject, and we don't know, like, how much time there was in between these text messages, or if there were other text messages that were inconsequential. But I'm just going through the order that Agent Hart went, and if I skipped any, like, I'll mark it with the ellipses, the ... Okay, Lori. Mel knew. She called me. She felt the real Brighton last night and knew she was different. She was told I didn't want to tell her. So I think she's saying, like, Melanie heard from God that Lori knew and didn't want to tell her. She is taking, and I think she meant it well, and knowing it is part of a big plan. She is amazing. Again, more lips emojis. Although I'm still pretty upset over it. I love you. Trying to quote, hang in there. And those were her quotes and her spaces. And then again, she always had, I think always, or maybe almost always, always like follows it with something endearing, missing your kisses. So she is like really pulling out all the stops on the kiss and the little lips emoji. But so, here she presents this like, wow, you know what? Yeah, Melani, God told her, like, we didn't even have to tell her. And God even told her that Lori didn't want to tell her. I mean, like, these people are out of their minds. But so now, here Chad is processing. Okay, so now we have 4 kids who are all marked for death. Okay, so then fast forwarding. So what was the date? That was July 26th. 3 days later, Lori and Melani, I think also Alex, they all went to California for some R&R because I guess, murder weighs heavy on the mind. So they were on this trip. They were in California, and Chad and Lori have this text exchange about Melani's kids. That is really dark. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's also really sad. Chad, one question. Do you want me to cause pain yet to those 2 3s you're riding with? And the 3s were in reference to Brighton and Blake. Apparently they were 3D. Lori, probably hold off on them till we arrive. They will be mistake to deal with, but I'll text you if they start acting up and we can zap them. Miserable, not mistake. Chad, sounds great. Yes, if they are going to act up, we'll at least give them a reason to scream. And Chad follows. I love, cherish, treasure, and adore you. The wonderful memories just keep coming back because, he had just been there. You are mesmerizing. Raphael is one lucky guy. So, the next day, we see a drop in JJ's death percentage. Chad, I got the inspiration to go back to my original death percentages that helped us track Charles, Ned, etc. Tammy is very close. Her percentage has fallen steadily since Eblos left. It is encouraging. Hearts. Kiss. Lori, what is the percentage now? What about JJ's too? So she is unrelenting. She's like, great, this is progress. We've already marked off Tylee, Blake, and Brighton. But in her mind, is like, we just have 2 left that you need to get on. So what about JJ's 2? Chad, Tammy is at 3. JJ is at 2. So now he's dropped. Like, he went from 99.99% to just a few days after being with his lover. JJ was at 2. So not 0, but very close. Both are being heavily shielded to stop intruders. I'm sure this made Lori very angry. The last thing she wanted to hear was that Tammy and JJ were being shielded. But I did wonder if that was, like if Chad was kind of laying like a foundation, like, well, even though I said he's a 2, the adversary, or like whoever is protecting JJ and Tammy, they're heavily shielded. So I'm sure to Lori that came across like, fish or cut bait, we'll say. That's a better expression than the first one that came to mind. So Lori, 2 and 3%, not 0. I added the emphasis, obviously these were text messages. Not 0. So here she is making it clear, like, you were just with me for 3 days, and are you here to tell me that your wife and my son still aren't at 0? Okay, so just kind of tuck away this date. All right, so August 4th, this was the weekend of their big prayer circle in Arizona. It took some like stitching different sources together to like kind of get to this list of who was there, but Zulema kind of let us know the date, because there was another reference to like the first weekend in August. That was David Warwick at Chad's preliminary hearing, so I kind of tucked that away. But then Zulema had said, I think this was Zulema. Oh, okay, no, this was Lori. I need us all to get together on Sunday night, and so I think this was Zulema. No, this was also Lori. So if it says red, that is Lori. If it says sent, that's Zulema. I usually add a Z and an L. But Lori said, did you get a hold of Julie about tomorrow? So Julie was Julie Clement, not Julie Rowe. And Zulema, no, I thought you were. I'll text her now. Lori, do you know where Melanie G is at? Melanie Gibb, obviously. Yeah, they went to speak in Northern Arizona, but they will be back tomorrow. So we know that Melanie and David, they're speaking at an event in Northern Arizona, but they're going to be back for this big day. And then when Julie Clement was interviewed, she had said, she talked about the time she met with Lori, Chad, and I know that this was the same event because Chad had come down to Arizona for it. Now, Lori, Chad, Melanie, that's her niece, Melanie, that's Melanie Gibb, Zulema, Alex, and others. So, and then when Melanie Gibb was asked, she recalled, she was talking about the prayer circle and indicated that she and her boyfriend David, so that's how I found out, that confirmed that David Warwick was there with all of the other, people we already knew about. So Melanie didn't include Zulema and Julie didn't include David, but I think between these different references, I think we have a pretty good idea of who was there. Now, I suspect that this is when Chad met the kids. So just tuck that away. There's a bacon reference later that I think points to this. And part of the reason I think that is, I think when he came out the week before for those 3 days, I suspect they probably stayed in a hotel and they did not Lori didn't introduce Chad to Tylee and JJ. First of all, I think it would have been too soon after Charles had been killed and she already didn't trust Tylee. So then to introduce them to Chad that soon after Charles was killed, I think would have been problematic. Plus, Lori really needed to get Chad to agree to, rate JJ as dark too. And anyway, so I suspect that this weekend she actually introduced Chad to Tylee and JJ, and I suspect it was to help push him over the edge to rate JJ as dark, and we'll see that it worked. Okay, now is about to get really crazy, and this, I think this next slide, this was the new information, at least for me. Okay, so August 7th, so this was right after their big casting where like they talked about how they stood in a circle, they held hands, they all had like different powers. We know that there were crystals. I think there were also like vibrating or there were crystals, there was fire, there was vibrating fire, and all of this craziness. Like Serena, she had like the power of water, and all of this stuff. So everyone brought their witchy powers and would use them as they did these castings. And Melanie, she had such a hard time. Melanie Gibb had such a hard time remembering who they were doing castings on that weekend. But she she was like, I don't know, maybe Charles. No, Charles was already dead. Or maybe Brandon. But she was like, I knew it definitely wasn't the kids. But then another one from their group, I think it was Christina, had said that they did a casting for Tylee, and Serena talked about how Lori talked about how difficult it was to live with someone who was so dark. So these friends, they were all hearing about like how difficult it was for Lori to have this dark daughter, and no one did anything. But okay, so all right, this is where it really gets batshit crazy. So Lori texted Chad, "I love you. Taking Braxy home now." That's Braxton, Melanie and Brandon's oldest son. "I'll check on her," which I'm assuming is Brighton, because she followed up with a text saying she is asleep. She put a bunch of holes in the walls and door. So anytime she's like really trying to convince Chad of like how dark someone is, she assigns these behaviors that are bizarre. It's like, Blake drew crosses on the wall and they had to like go and, paint them. Now Brighton is putting a bunch of holes in the walls and the doors. I mean, she was a little girl, but okay. And then with JJ later on, when David and Melanie were at Lori's apartment, he climbed up on the refrigerator and knocked a picture of Jesus off and was like climbing up on the cabinets and stuff. So I mean, this is again, I'm just circling back on my position that I do not think Lori is intelligent, like in the least. But anyway, okay, definitely had demons helping her. Probably 1,000. Lori, again. "Mel wants us to come up there tomorrow, but I said next Thursday to Sunday." And that was August 15th to the 18th. I looked it up. So again, this is August 7th. And she's like, "Hey, Melanie wants us to come up there tomorrow." So we're just going to like, I don't know if they were like planning on bringing their kids. I mean, because here she's laying this foundation of like, wow, like Brighton, she's getting worse. She probably has demons helping her, probably 1,000, and now she uses that as a, to lead up to Mel wants us to come up there tomorrow, but I said next Thursday to Sunday. What do you think? And then Lori said again, so Chad hasn't replied. "We are both so tired of taking care of demons. We are weary. Please ask the Lord to take them." So this gives me, I mean, first of all, like when I read this, like, like I said, I thought I was pretty much like immune to any real shock from this case. But when I read this, it was just so sad. Like here, it just tells the story of Lori and Melanie like commiserating about their dark kids, and they're searching for life insurance. I don't know that we don't know about Melanie's search records because no one has investigated Melanie. But Chad doesn't reply. Again, this is August 7th. August 8th, I'll say his foundation. I think this freaked Chad out because he didn't reply, and then the next day was when they had their fight. So they didn't share, we don't know, if this happened over the phone or if investigators just didn't share the text messages. But Lori texted Melanie to tell her that their trip to Idaho is off. Lori, we just had a big fight. Probably no go on next week. Melanie, are you okay? Melanie, I love you. If you need to talk at all, just call me. I don't sleep anyways. I mean, they're both like such martyrs. Hang in there, babe. It was a hard day. Don't let the dumb things here get to you. You know who you are. Praying for our hearts to be made full and for the Lord to execute all things expeditiously. They're talking about murder, and the way they intertwine this religious jargon with okay, well, I guess it didn't go so well. I guess Chad doesn't want us to come up tomorrow, but you know what? We're just gonna pray, Okay, so then this is the same day. This is August 8th. Chad, we don't know what led up to this, but Chad said, my heart is crushed, but I will never stop loving you. So, and let me back up. So, I think it was Agent Hart who said the fight was over their travel plans and his family vacation. But I don't think, I don't know, but I wonder, I'll just say that. I wonder if part of it was just this was moving way too fast for Chad. Just the thought of yeah, so we might just show up in Rexburg tomorrow with 4 kids. I don't know what their plan was. And one of the things, I'll back up a little bit. I said something to my daughter this week because I started to touch on it, I forgot about it. But I said to her, that the piece I really don't understand is why would Lori, why would she withhold Bailey from JJ? And you'll see why I'm circling back on this. And my daughter said something that, I don't know if there's merit to it, but it was kind of profound. She was like, well, because I think they knew they wouldn't be able to murder JJ if Bailey was there. And I was like, whoa. I don't think it had ever crossed my mind that the original plan may have been for them to murder the kids before they went to Idaho. And if that was part of the reason, Lori was, so willing to have him come down and then it's okay, we have this weekend where we're pulling out all the stops. We pull all these people together to do this casting. I mean, and anyway, so I just wonder if for Chad, and again, I am not in any way making excuses for him or minimizing his role in this, because quite the opposite. The fact that he seemed to be struggling with his conscience makes him that much more culpable, because it's as the saying goes, he sinned against more light. He knew, I think, on some level, clearly he didn't have a strong conscience, but he somehow drew the line at murdering or even assigning a low death percentage to a special needs child. But anyway, so Chad, he's already talking in breakup terms. My heart is crushed, but I will never stop loving you. Missing you, heading to the girl's funeral. Emma was her teacher and is one of the speakers. This is very difficult, but I will abide by your request, request to not talk. I mean, I just pulled it just from the video. I hate causing you pain because I love you more than ever. Then Chad again. You're the best. I hope your day goes well. I adore you. Chad. Absolutely excruciating to be cut off from you. I love you. Chad. Good night. Saddest day of my life. Now Chad starts to get pissed. Grandpa Keith is here. I am supposed to warn you that you are unprotected. The angels are angry that you are ignoring me. I told him to go back, but he says he isn't allowed to. I'm honestly not trying to manipulate you to respond. Okay, Chad. I understand that you need your space, but they say you have cut me off, and the protection I built around your house is gone. I love you and don't want you getting attacked. They said that if you at least give me a thumbs up emoji, it will restore our connection enough to give some protection. Lori. I love you. Chad, thank you, my love. I will get things restored. Yeah, this was Chad's ancestors. All right. Okay. All right. Again, August 9th. All right. So Lori's still feeling salty. They're still in contact, but Lori's not happy. So, oops, this should be Lori, not Chad. Lori, can you check Nathan Pacheco? See what level he is? Is he light? I had to look up this dude. Like, he's an LDS singer and songwriter. Like, why does she care what some LDS singer and songwriter is? She follows up. Lori, also Mike Stroud. Mel G thinks he went dark, but I think he's light. So she's making him run the gauntlet. Chad, I will check those two. Chad, follow up. Any guesses on Pacheco? You can tell he's like, shoot, I have no idea how to rate this dude. Lori, just tell me. Chad. Yeah, right? 4.1 dark. Lori. Such a biatch. Nope. I get 5.1 light. Part of our team. Chad. We'll go with your answer. So he doesn't fight. He doesn't say, listen here, woman, I'm the one who rates people light and dark. Even like some of the people who have testified, like Melanie Gibb and Zulema, they were all like, oh, Chad, was the one who rated people. No, there's an entire document of Lori rating all of the modern day leaders of the LDS church, like people who had died, and all kinds of people. So I mean, it was pages. They redacted most of it, but no, they were both rating people. But here they are. She challenges him to an arm wrestling competition, and she's like, "Nope, loser, you're dumb." Yeah, he's 5.1 light and part of our team. So Chad, he flips on his belly. He's like, "We'll go with your answer." And then Lori, nope, she's not going to let that go. Why? What's wrong with your picker? And when I read this, and even like long before when I first saw it, I was like, okay, yeah, no, she was the one, as Keith said, driving the bus. Like, she doesn't just let it go. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I just really feel strongly about him. Like, like I listened to his YouTube videos. I mean, there's no explanation. She just quizzes him and he fails. And then she excoriates him for failing. And then when he flips on his back, she excoriates him for not fighting for the rating. And she was like, why? What's wrong with your picker? And then Lori, she kind of pins him down. What about Mike Stroud? Seriously. So I think she's kind of saying, like, don't give me this, like, what do you think? What's your guess or whatever? And he doesn't even rate him. He just said he's done a great infiltration job. I think at this point, he's annoyed. He knows that, she's still just mad. And yeah, so, all right, the next day. So this, they get into this fight on the 8th. She kind of takes him to task on the 9th. And then August 10th, she finally gets her way. Lori, sorry about the chat. So what I was doing was taking text to fields and copying and pasting them into different slides. But anyway, Lori, again, please check JJ. So she's already, pulled him through the keyhole backwards, and now she circles back. Please check JJ. I think she's like, we could do this all day, every day. He just woke up saying crazy stuff and won't go back to sleep. He is talking to Blake. It's weird. Chat. JJ is still JJ. I am told his spirit recognizes Blake is evil and is unsettled by him. And chat follows up. Hi, my love. How is JJ now? Lori. He's better. He was just up talking nonsense for like 2 hours last night. I'm sure they were bugging him. Is he at 0 yet? So now, she's so direct. Like, it's a yes or no. Is he at 0 yet? And then, I miss you. Like, no kissy emojis, no heart emojis. I think at this point, she was like, listen, I offed my husband. And now you're dicking around for a month with all these, all these different ratings and death percentages that, aren't favorable to us being together. So now you really need to fish or cut bait. Chad, yes, he's at 0. He probably was partly through the veil, talking to people both light and dark. So that's how he explains, him saying and talking nonsense for 2 hours. Lori, maybe he was talking to the real Blake. Chad, yes, that was the real Blake. Lori, do you think there is a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children and we just have to wait for it to be carried out? Lori follows up. I feel lost, like I should be doing something to help, as if like she hasn't done enough. Chad, there is a plan being orchestrated for the children. I was shown last night how it fit together, but it has been taken away from my mind, of course. And I'm sure at this point, like, Lori was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is not the like heroic Moroni type that she thought she was training up. Lori, what should I be doing? And I really feel like she's like, we need a plan. We need to nail this down. What do you want me to do? Chad, you are doing everything right, my love. The Lord told me she is right on track. He said to just keep resolving the celestial issues so you are unencumbered and fully free. Chad, that actually feels good that JJ was talking to the real Blake, getting close. When I was sitting across from him eating bacon, I sensed he was barely attached to his body. Now, again, we don't know when he was sitting across from JJ eating bacon, but I do know that during this trial, when this came out, I was like, wait a minute. When would he have been eating with JJ? And that's why I concluded that he met Tylee and JJ the first weekend in August. So I wonder, like I said, I don't wonder. I suspect that Lori intentionally had him meet Tylee and JJ to show him this is what life will actually be like. It'll be unending interruptions. It'll be, helping JJ through, whatever he was dealing with. At this point, he was unmedicated. His life had been absolute chaos for almost a year. And he hadn't heard from his dad. And then they moved to, well, they were about to move. But, there was just so much chaos. I'm sure Tylee was also not in a good place because she knew that she had been identified as a zombie, according to Melanie Gibb. And it said, "Not me, Mom." And, so I just think that entire home was in absolute turmoil. And I think it was intentional. I think it was strategic. Obviously, it was intentional. But I think it was strategic to have Chad experience what life would be like with Tylee and JJ. So he, refers back to that time. You know what? When I was sitting across from him eating bacon, I sensed he was barely attached to his body. So I think that was, I might be looking too much into this. That's fine. But I think that's when he probably really started to lean a little bit more toward, is this really what I wanted? Like, I thought I was going to have like this sex goddess. And, here he was like an empty nester. He still had kids at home, but they were adult kids and stuff. Anyway, so Chad said, "You are so incredible in so many ways. Your mission has barely begun. Lori, as long as it ends with you, it's all good." So again, he's like pouring out his heart and she's like, "Yeah, okay. As long as it ends with you, it's all good." All right. August 11th. So again, let's back up. This is the next day. And this is also Chad's birthday. Lori breaks up with Chad. Sort of, kind of. But there's a twist to it that at least I'll present a case for that. All right, so a little bit more background. Lori was getting desperate because we don't know when this happened, but her landlord, who was friends with Charles and had known both Lori and Charles for years, even visited them in Hawaii and stuff. He had come into a Facebook group I was in and was just talking about Charles, and you can see the full screenshot on the site. Just look up this date. But one of the things he said was, "I spoke with Lori several times following the shooting, and she never sounded shocked, sad, or heartbroken, as you would think a bride would be watching her husband die. I asked her to move out, which she did August 31st. So this kind of, again, paints a backdrop of Lori is probably starting to feel desperate. Like, pretty soon, she has very little money coming in. $4,000 a month is certainly not going to support this habit of flying Chad out. Chad didn't make money. They were living at poverty level, and everything was kind of like falling apart around her, because with losing that $1 million, she also lost a lot of hooks that she had in people. All right. So, and I suspect she also felt like she was losing control of Colby because, like all of this stuff was happening, and I'm sure Colby may have started to distance himself, may have started to question things, and now here's Chad, and he won't commit to actually moving forward. Like, Tammy wasn't a zero yet. Like, she just got JJ to zero, but in a couple weeks she's going to be homeless. All right. So Chad says, "I will join you." I don't know, like maybe she wanted to talk to him. "Partly why I am so sad is my Boise trip has turned into a trip with extended family. Not happy about it." Lori, how much more of this can you take? As if like she gives a flying, what he can take. Chad, But she's just trying to like kind of stoke that fire. Like, this makes you really angry, right? Like, this is really terrible for you, right? Because it wasn't working so well for her to really just focus on herself and Melanie. Chad, they want to go to Craters of the Moon National Park. I can't take much more. So trapped. Lori, are we supposed to wait forever? Chad, no, but the next 2 days will be torture. Thankfully, I will be alone most of Wednesday and beyond. Lori, is that what he wants? She's talking about God. For me to sit around waiting for you endlessly and you miserably wasting time just doesn't feel right. So obviously she meant it just doesn't feel right. Chad, I agree. It feels so drawn out. Lori, it's heartbreak, heartbreak, heartbreak. Chad, I'm just so frustrated. I'm sorry, honey. Lori, that is not enough for her. Lori, you can't just keep tearing my heart out. I really can't take it anymore. I'm sorry. Like, this reads like a B-rated soap opera. Chad, it is tearing both our hearts out. Please look beyond the next 2 days. Lori, what about the past 2 days? I didn't even get to talk to you on your birthday. I'm clearly not a priority. I just don't want to be so sad all the time. And she meant so heartbroken. Lori, if you really loved me, you wouldn't want that either. Chad, I could have talked, but the girls were there. I truly love you with all my heart. Lori, this was where she sent, again, the infamous breakup text. You should give all, that should have been, your love and your attention to your wife and family. I'm just a distraction. Go have fun with your family. I really do want you to. I just can't be in the way anymore. If things change, then we can talk, but we have nothing until things change anyway. Sorry, had to take a drink. Chad, oh honey, that is so crushing. I feel so destroyed inside. You know my love for you is deep and real. I want change. I'm constantly begging for change. I want you. Nothing else matters. But I am hindering your life and you deserve better. I love you so intensely. This really stood out to me. I hadn't noticed this before. But I didn't know. I think we just got the extended text exchange in one of the trials. I'm not sure. But anyway, but you would think like he would be fighting really hard for her. Like, are you kidding me? No, no, no. You know, like, yeah, just wait a couple days and I'm sure, you know, I feel like, because normally when he wants something, he's like, oh, I feel like something's coming and this and that, you know, it's like he's kind of building up for it. But here he's like, but I'm hindering your life and you deserve better. So I just wonder if there was a part of Chad who I do believe he was sincerely in love with her. I just don't believe that she was in love with him. I believe she wanted someone who would get Alex to kill her kids. And for some reason, she wasn't enough, I think, to get Alex to do what she needed him to do. I mean, she was still working on him too, but it really seems like Alex needed something from Chad. Chad, but I will leave you alone, as excruciating as that will be until I hear from you. So I just don't know if he's done or if he's calling her bluff. But he definitely ended up calling her bluff because she's like, you can't say to me nothing else matters because everything is for me. If that's what the Lord wants, then I just need to do something. And she had an X in there. I don't know why. So I can pull myself out of this deep despair. It's not like me to be this way. It's been way too much for way too long. The pain is unbearable. So Chad, you are right. No, you would think like if Lori really just was like done, like I'm just done. You know, anyone who's ever broken up with someone, you're like, okay, I'm done. it really doesn't matter what you say at this point. I'm done. Like, we're just going to like wrap this up. But she doesn't. Like, she kind of circles back. She was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not totally done with you hearing from me. So Chad says, you are right. Put me aside until things change. Yes, the pain is unbearable. So again, I was just like, it really seems like I don't know. I just question if part of him was just like, this is gone too far. Like, yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, the sex is amazing, but like, can I really sign off on the murder of 4 kids when I already signed off on the murder of her husband, and while we're also talking about the murder of my wife? And he also had to be thinking, I'm probably gonna not, like, do too well in prison, like if we're caught. Okay, so Lori, she's just hanging on. Yeah, she just keeps the conversation moving forward. Are you going to threaten me that I'm unprotected for doing so? Chad, absolutely not. I'm so upset at the circumstances that I am demanding they protect you more than ever. And then Lori, I'm so alone without you. It is devastating. Because I think at this point, it's the 11th. She has to be out by the end of the month. And she's like, uh-oh. Like, I don't have a plan B. She didn't have a job. She only was bringing in $4,000 a month. And moving is expensive. It's really expensive. But, yeah, so I don't think she ever intended to break up with him. I think she was trying to, like, force him to make a decision. Okay, Tammy and JJ are both at 0, and this is the plan. Chad replies, I feel so alone too. We are surrounded by celestial relatives that are simply obstacles. I'm so sick of it. Lori, me too. What is it that you really want? Chad, I want to be with you. That is my greatest hope and dream. I would happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down. So again, I am not pro Chad. I am not in any way justifying or minimizing anything he did. His actions were absolutely deplorable. But this tells me, like, Lori was all in the entire time. Like, okay, let's go. Dark spirits. All right. We already have Tylee underway. My husband is, dead and buried. Let's get this going. And clearly he's like, I would happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down. Why would he be concerned about heaven striking them down? Because he is clearly feeling some pangs of conscience. Okay, the next day, this may be relevant, it may not. You can click through to the source. It's John Pryor going on and on, because he's kind of circuitous in his questioning. But we found out, like, on August 12th, so this is the next day, she makes Colby the sole beneficiary of a $2 million life insurance policy. Well, at this point, I mean, Charles had been gone for a month. She had bigger fish to fry, and she wasn't under this, so-called imminent threat of being murdered. And I don't know who her beneficiary had been when she and Charles were separated and fighting. It might have been like both of her kids, and maybe she just switched it. Or it might have been like a shared policy, and then she just switched it and made Colby the sole beneficiary. But I do wonder if this was part of Lori's world is falling apart, And it's like, if you've ever seen the spinning plate routine, this person, I think it's like from the 70s or 80s, and the guy was like spinning, a plate, and then he goes and he spins another plate, and then he starts spinning another plate, and then one plate, starts slowing down, so he has to go back, spin that, and, it just went on ad nauseum. But it just seems like this might be what Lori's doing. It's like she's spinning this plate with Chad, and she has all of these irons. Now she's spinning a plate with her landlord. She agrees to move out at the end of the month. She really doesn't have a plan unless she was going to like move in with Alex. Now Alex was probably going to have a hard time with living with Tylee, who he was all in, thinking that she was a dark portal. So I do wonder if she decided in the midst of this melee to try to like pull Colby back in, like, just so you know, I made you the sole beneficiary of my $2 million life insurance policy. We don't even know, to be fair, we don't even know if Colby knew that he was made the beneficiary, but it would be consistent with her other behavior to use something like this to try to pull Colby back in. Okay, August 14th, Lori's shopping for wedding rings. So we don't know what happened between August 11th and August 14th. But here she is shopping for glow-in-the-dark malachite titanium rings. And she orders them. She also sends a picture to Melani. So it shows just how much they were in on all of this. Clearly, Melani knew the plan that, Tammy was also going to die. And, she had already been looking out for Lori with regard to, getting the kids insured and stuff. But like I said in the last live, and I've talked about before, at some point, the artist... she ordered them on Etsy, and he was too busy with school and had to cancel the order. But the same day, she applies for an apartment in Rexburg. And we'll listen to that.
Okay. On August 14th was the date that we received the application that we received from the rental company that Miss Vallow had applied for her apartment in Rexburg. And per this application, Miss Vallow states that she's receiving $5,740 Social Security funds.
And did that track with your review of the financial information for the Social Security?
No, ma'am. No.
Okay, so that was significant. Again, this was former agent Doug Hart. He and Detective Consitus were my favorite witnesses, mostly because they were like the facts guys. Like, they just went down, the list of facts, the lots of details, and I think they both went in chronological order. So I've been, as I have time, just going in, and especially, again, now that I have this app, like, I can just search for all references to August, like, just to see, okay, well, what else was happening at this time? But yeah, so, clearly something happened, because they were fighting and, breaking up on the 11th. Chad was afraid of, God striking him down. And then somehow by the 14th, Lori's luck had turned. Okay, 2 days later, Lori sets up Tylee's Social Security to deposit into her account. So she moved Tylee's Social Security to deposit into her account. She didn't receive the first deposit yet. She just set it up. You can listen to that on your own. I mean, he's just like reciting the date and stuff. Okay, August 20th to the 25th. Lori is in Rexburg. So She, found an apartment she liked, she applied, and now she's in Rexburg. We did find out from the second document dump that she traveled from Phoenix to Idaho under the name of Lori Ryan. And Detective Consitis mentioned that she had set up a flight a day or two after Charles was killed. He didn't say what that was for, but I suspect that was their trip to Houston. So I think that was scheduled like the next day or maybe 2 days later. But he mentioned that that was the last time she used the name Lori Vallow in scheduling a flight. All of the other flights that she took, she used Lori Ryan. Now, it appears Melani was with her. So this was another new piece of information for me.
She booked a flight a day or so after Charles died, but still used the name Val, but everything else is Lori Ryan. So in August, you see up here the timeline, they're moving to Idaho. And in late August, Lori flies up a round trip from Phoenix Mesa to Idaho Falls, and she books her flight. And Melani Boudreaux, and that's Lori's niece, she was also on this trip. We believe that this is the signing of the rental lease just prior to them moving up.
So we don't know, at least I don't think we know what day she actually signed the lease, but I had looked up the address on, I believe it was Zillow. A lot of these sites where you can like find out about rentals and stuff, they also list like the history of the rentals and how much the house or apartment was rented for and stuff. So the apartment that Lori rented was off the market August 27th. So so it stands to reason that this was the trip that Melani went with her on. And at this point, I just wonder, like Lori was running out of money, and I just wonder if she was keeping Melani on the hook because she needed money. I don't even know that she would have had enough for like the deposit on the apartment and stuff. So I wonder how much Melani may have been financing this trip in the hopes that Lori and Chad would move forward with the plan to, what appeared to be the plan, to kill Brandon and her two middle children.
She booked.
Oh yeah, I just said they had a diabolically symbiotic relationship. Okay, so August 25th. So this is, I think, the last day of that trip. I'm assuming she probably signed the lease on August 25th, but she's in financial duress. So I mentioned this, and I played this video in the last live, so you can check it out. But the essence of it was this was another attempt she had made to buy malachite wedding rings. So in the last live, I used it to really focus on, she was they both clearly were very committed to having malachite rings. But these rings were also a little more on the expensive side. I mean, nothing like what you would normally pay for a wedding ring, but they were like in the I think around the $200 range, just like the ones from Etsy. But her card was declined. But what was interesting to me is, sometimes the story is like between the lines, you would think, okay, like her one card is declined. This isn't a consequential purchase. Use another card. But what I thought was interesting was that she didn't use another card. Like she didn't buy these rings, and she then wouldn't buy rings for another almost, I don't know, somewhere around 6 weeks. And so to me, I just wonder if she was, like flying that close to the sun that she couldn't afford $200 rings. And at this point, we're really inching toward the end of August. Like, she still has to, pack up. She has to get a moving truck. She has to actually move, and then, just all the expenses that most people have with moving in and stuff, and it just looks like she, at this point, was broke as a joke. Okay, August 28th. So we're coming up on their move to Rexburg. We know that they moved August 31st. Lori receives the initial Social Security deposit for Tylee. So Tylee was getting, I think it was like $1,830 some dollars. And interestingly, like when Lori reported her income, she hadn't yet then, at this point, like that was what, August 14th, she hadn't set up Tylee's account to transfer to her bank account yet. But clearly Lori had already decided that she would need to take over Tylee's Social Security to qualify for the apartment. I think the apartment was around $1,200 a month. But to qualify, and also just to live, like she was running out of money. Okay, and this just verifies that that she received the first payment on August 28th. You can listen to that on your own. I mean, it's like
August.
13 seconds, but we need to move this along. Okay, August. Sorry. So that was everything like leading up to their move to Rexburg. And then obviously we know what happened from once they moved to Rexburg. Like, we don't know what happened in terms of Melani's kids. I will say there was one time, and I almost pulled this up. I was like, I already have too many slides. When Ian was documenting everything, he was also in contact with his ex-wife. I think her name was Natalie Pulaski. And he made mention at one point that that Melani had thought her two middle kids had been killed too. And he said something to the effect of, like, I don't know why she would think that, obviously, like, the police would have known that. And I was thinking about it, like, in the context, even as I was just kind of mulling over, preparing for this, I was like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, because Melani talked to Gilbert police the next day. Obviously, if her two middle kids had also been killed, she would have known. Like, they would have brought that up. They would have told her, like, it's not like the police is like, let's not tell her yet. I mean, and they were so soft on her. It's certainly not like, oh, we think, she's a suspect in this and stuff. Like, they let her bring her daughter, and, they're like, I mean, it was very, very soft. And so I do wonder, at this point, none of these players get any benefit of the doubt from me. But I do wonder, and like at that point, Ian was really freaked out, like really, really freaked out, because he was scared for his own kids. And, that's why, like, he even went with his ex-wife. So they had a pretty, pretty contentious divorce, but they were aligned on this because they were both freaked out. And so they went to the police together and stuff. So I do wonder now, when he sent, I'm pretty sure that text was to Natalie and said that, she thinks that her two middle kids were killed, or, and like, well, her daughter came to her and thanked her for like letting her use her agency and stuff. I think that Ian knows way more than he is saying. I think he tamped everything down when he had to codify everything for the lawyers, because at that point he had decided, I'm in this marriage, I'm not cooperating with police, and my kids are safe. I don't really care what's going on with Tylee and JJ. He even, said on Dateline, I think basically this is much to do about nothing, or something to that effect. So I just wonder if he was trying to get the message, like, she wants her kids dead. Like, he knew, because how could you hear that your brand new wife is like, yeah, my daughter, she came to me, she thanked me for letting her use her agency. And, and this was in keeping with Lori's, her ridiculous testimony that she shared at Melanie Gibbs' house, where she was like, and if your kids go to the other side, it's because they wanted to go to the other side. It's because they chose to go to the other side. And I think that's how they padded their consciences, not that they really had a conscience. But so all that said, I think Ian knew what, I don't think he may not have known everything, but I think he knew what was going on. But that's neither here nor there. October 14th, this was new information for me. Melanie asked Lori if they could do a second pass on Brandon. And this was not even 2 weeks after his attempted shooting. Lori, yeah, so we don't know what led up to this, so I didn't leave this part out. I certainly would have included more context. Lori, yeah, but until that agreement is signed by the judge, it is all subject to change. That's probably the reason for the delay. Melanie, is there a possibility that he could go before I move? So she was moving the end of the month. Yeah, this was October 14th. Like Lori, she's like, I mean, she's really between a rock and a hard place, not so much financially, because they closed on their house the day before Alex tried to, allegedly tried to murder Brandon. But but she didn't know, like, they were still, a heightened paranoia. Like, Lori's flying under the name Ryan. Melanie had told Brandon that she was going to move to Boise, tried to negotiate custody over text, I could keep him, this, and you could do this. If that's not okay, then, maybe I could, I think she was like half the summers and stuff. But anyway, so okay, but here she is. Is there a possibility he could go before I move? Lori, there's always that possibility. We will work on it. Just have faith and do whatever the Lord tells you. He is always right. Melanie, she's like, I don't really care about all that. I don't recall the words to get him out, but should we try? Lori, I know them. I'll work on it now. Put all your energy in. Melanie, I've worked on them all day and evening. Lori, me too. He's got to be ready to go. Melanie, I know. So, yeah. So, if you want to access the presentation, you can go to bit.ly/CD-evolution. All right, now I will take some time for Q&A after a drink. Okay. See here. Whew. All right. So, like I said, that was intense. I've been obviously playing with my hair. I run my fingers through my hair when I'm stressed. Okay, that just made it way worse. Okay, so if you have any questions, just put the word question in all caps or use a question emoji, and that will help it to stand out. Yeah, no problem, Felicia. Anna, who usually collects the questions, stepped out. Maybe that'll give me a second to get my hair under control. Okay. So I'll just scan for some questions until I see some. Okay. Thank you, Anna. All right. Nola V asked, hey, Nola, do we know if Jason Mao is on the witness list? No. I kind of doubt it. I read through his testimony again. There was one thing that had stood out to me. I forgot what it was. I mean, he definitely played down, like, you know, what he knew and how well he knew them and stuff. I did think it was interesting, though, that, like, they got, I think it was like a month of his financials, and he dropped them by the police department. But then I think it was like a Costco, like something with Costco or something. So I was like, oh, that's weird. But yeah, I just don't think that. I don't think he would. I mean, you know, he might get called. I just don't think that the state would see him as a particularly useful witness. But I could be surprised. And I also wonder with some of these witnesses, you know, just knowing the amount of visibility and coverage that these trials are getting, I do wonder if there are some witnesses who won't be called just to protect them. I'm not saying that the state would have any interest in protecting Jason, but I do wonder with some of the witnesses if they won't get called just because the state is like, you know, there's too much like compromising evidence, and, you know, Lori will decimate them. Okay. Oops. Let's see here. I just finished creating an app today and I didn't want to shut it down, so it is causing some lag on my computer. Okay, so Justice for All asked, when do you think Lori realized Chad was not the wealthy book publisher and author she thought she snagged? I don't think she ever thought that. It's too easy to look up someone's address on Google Earth, you know, like, so I don't know when he would have shared his address, but I just don't think that she actually thought that he was wealthy. I think she thought she would be the wealthy one. And and also I think, you know, like control was really important to her. And you know, like her two previous husbands had done well financially, but she wasn't, you know, like then she was kind of more a trophy wife. And I think that this life insurance made her feel like she was the powerful one, you know. So yeah, I could be surprised, but I don't think that's why she wanted to be with Chad. I think she wanted to be with Chad because clearly they had already talked at the conference they met at. They clearly were already talking about murdering their significant others, at least like with the affidavit of probable cause out of Idaho. They had said that they would prove that on or about October 26th was when they started conspiring to, I think it was like kill Tammy and hurt the kids. So it wasn't murdering the kids at first, which we've already seen. But yeah, so I think they were both testing each other, and I think it really looks like Chad was much more about like, this is amazing. I could have this, beautiful wife. I'll be the envy, of the whole like preparing of people and like their group, and she was so dynamic, and I think he just thought like they would just bang all day, and he got to take this walk on the wild side, and then I think she was using that to to lure him, but clearly they both had an appetite for this, because for him to send her that ratings document, like just days after meeting her, he clearly, he probably already had fantasies, and, they were like almost like a wannabe Ken and Barbie killer, where there are some killers, they just need to like feed off of another killer. Like I don't think either of them would have done all of this alone. I think, like I've talked before about, Lori has this like emotional echolocation device where she has to be constantly getting feedback. And that's part of the reason, she has no internal editor, because she just always has to be getting that constant feedback and affirmation from other people that, she's the prettiest, she's the most special, Jesus may love you, but he loves me more, and and things like that. So clearly he had very, very serious issues. It just seemed like the only thing he hesitated on was, well, two things. One, signing off on JJ's murder, and a little less so with Tammy. Okay. BC wants a pony asked. Why do you think Melani still has access to her kids and has not been charged? I just think, I don't know. I do support police. Like, I really do. I'm very, very grateful for what they do day in, day out. Like, I'm not out there putting my life on the line. I work in code. I work with data, like no one's holding a gun to my head. I don't wonder when I, go to work, which most of the time is like my office. I'm not wondering, will today be the day that my kids will be motherless? So it's really important to me to say that before I say what I'm about to say. I think that there is something really wrong in Gilbert and Chandler police departments, and also Phoenix. So, we just see this pattern with Gilbert police where, they didn't take Charles seriously. They helped Lori evade a pickup order. Now, to be fair, initially it wasn't a mandatory pickup. It became mandatory, I think, the next day. But they gave her instructions multiple times on how to evade a pickup order. And even said, well, the order is with our I don't know, like chief, I think it was, or captain or someone. But, so if you're still here when, when she looks at, like, so he was, I forget exactly what he said, but he was basically like, yeah, if you leave, that's going to increase your chances of not having to, go to community bridges for this psych eval. And, so that was strike one. They really blew Charles off. Even when Lori admitted egregious things like taking all of the money, and she was like, and so I took his car, and he was mad about that. And even then, I don't want to misquote him, but I have the video out on the channel. But the one police officer said something to the effect of, "That's a civil matter." So even when she was telling her herself, even when Tylee was like, correcting Lori and Melani, or challenging Melani, like, hey, how about you show him on your phone? She was like, oh yeah, I don't have it right here. Even though this was a text message from, just earlier today. So, that's another strike. But then, we'll just skip ahead to when they had Alex under surveillance. It was supposedly 24/7 surveillance. They noted that he and Zulema were getting into a truck. One of the detectives, maybe Detective Pillar, one of them testified that they had cameras up on the light posts in front of these different people's houses, or near these different people's houses, including Melanie Gibb, Zulema. I don't know who else. But so they supposedly had him under watch day and night. They had eyes on him. They noted that they had eyes on him, but said even something like, just noting this. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, they all, like Chandler, he was already a person of interest, a suspect, most likely, with the murder of Charles, because Chandler police knew before the day was over that Charles died. They knew that Alex had lied about Charles standing for both shots. And there were serious contradictions in their stories, but then they knew by the end of the week that he also lied about calling Lori. And they knew the day of that no one had performed CPR on Charles, because I think it was like maybe the fire chief. It was someone had noted that there was very little blood at the secondary wound. And anyway, and so, yeah, so, I mean, he was a suspect there. He was a suspect. They had already been told 2 months before that he, and I think by that point they even knew that he was the one who had driven the Jeep. They had him on surveillance just outside of Phoenix, like maybe an hour outside of Phoenix. So they had that, so he was a suspect in that shooting. And Tammy, her death was, suspicious. And, and they were gathering evidence against him, and like testimony and text messages and things like that. And it's December. Like, it was like maybe a day or two before he died. They had him on surveillance. I think it was like maybe December 9th, something like that. And they didn't arrest him. I'm like, what were you waiting for? And so, that was Gilbert police in regard to Alex's, death. And just their, like, know, just failure to act. And then here you have Melani. They only meet with her one time. They allow her to bring a toddler. So, of course, she has to be careful of what she says. They can't say the K word, or the M word, and, all of these things. And, I mean, they really, and she's being so deceptive. Like, they asked her who she had talked to the day before. So this is just the day before, and, it was the day her husband was shot at, and she couldn't say. They asked her, he asked her, like, where she had been. She was like, sometimes I, take my daughter to the mall, sometimes to a park. And I'm like, how are you letting her get away with this? Then, fast forward, they never follow up with her again. Except when I think she called because Brandon took off with the kids. But Brandon had already given them a heads up. And even then, they're not like, hey, you know what? While we have you on the phone, like, there's some suspicious details here, yeah, and then in the police report, so this was a police report in the FOIA docs, it noted that in the days leading up to the attempt on Brandon's life, it was like this date range of, I don't know, I think it was like September 24th to the 28th, something like that. Well, whatever this date range was, Melani was in Rexburg for the 3 middle days of that. And the police report noted that she was in Rexburg for, from this day to this day. The very next sentence, they start a new paragraph, but it's the next sentence, it said that week, so like they took the dates that, if you take the dates that Melani was there, was like one day before and one day after was when Lori, Alex, and Chad were planning the murder of Brandon Boudreaux. I was like, you just told us in the previous sentence that Melani was in Rexburg. What did you think Melani was doing? Like, I just thought that was one of the most ridiculous details in the police report. Like, how do you actually note that Melani, like, oh, good to know, Melani was in Rexburg right before her husband was shot at, but then you don't include her in the planning of his murder. So, I mean, I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it just really pays to be a bottle blonde and to have, fake lashes. I just don't know. But clearly, I think, their little baby girl voices, their petite figures, their beauty, I think it just all worked in their favor. But I really do not understand why Melani isn't awaiting trial too. It's just my opinion. I'm just, putting these things together. But even just with, having this app, being able to search across, like these trials and stuff, I just think, like, I'm sure if I found evidence that she clearly, well, I shouldn't say clearly, I am of the opinion that she was most likely involved in the planning of her husband's murder, and she wasn't just like touring Yellowstone and shopping at Walmart, although she was in Walmart her first night. But, through this, I'm pretty sure I'd be able to find more evidence, especially with, having a tool where I'd be able to like search across, like with these tools, when you're dealing with code, I mean, you could be like, I mentioned this before, but like, who was it? I forget his name. the agent, he had worked for the FBI. Can't think of his name off the top of my head, but anyway, but he had said, like, you know, we did, or this was on Dateline. Someone sent me a clip. I didn't watch the Dateline episode, but like something like we had to, you know, we were doing this all manually. Like we couldn't run keyword searches, and one of my mods dropped it in our mod chat. Was like, yeah, thought you would love this. But I mean, it was like, talk about a dagger through the heart. It was, and I'm not complaining about the job they did. Like they put Chad and Lori away for the rest of their lives. That said, they're the FBI. Like I could build a resource like this, and I'm one person, you know, working on a, you know, 6-year-old iMac. And but anyway, so yeah, so it is possible to do these keyword searches, and I think if they did, I think if they combined that, like if you had a dashboard where you have all the GPS data, so you have a map, and you know, I build these tools. In fact, I'm like launching a new one next week. But you know, like every collection of data, that's like called a node, and you can click on that node and get more information. So like they have so much GPS data that could be like a jumping off point. Like the map could be a jumping off point, and then you click through to a particular location, and you know that opens up a different visualization of, you know, like what took place in that particular town or that city. Like why was Chad in Utah the day that that Charles was going to be murdered? You know, maybe it means something, maybe it means nothing. Maybe it was just like summer being in New York, you know, like New York's the new Hawaii. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know, but I am absolutely not convinced that they couldn't make a case to prove that she not only played a role in the planning and carrying out of the attempted murder of Brandon, but she clearly was asking less than 2 weeks later, I mean, is there any chance that, you know, like he could go before I leave for, leave for Idaho? So, yeah. What did you think of Lori's witness list? I don't know. I don't really know. I'm not really sure what to expect with this trial. I know it's going to be a wild ride, but I mean, some of them, they're going to be hostile witnesses for sure. Like, so it did bother me that she called, or you know, she listed Tylee's friends. Vaisha, forget how to pronounce her name, and Ashlyn testified at Chad's trial, and I was really happy to hear from her at Chad's trial, because I knew she was the friend Tylee had talked to on her way up to Idaho. In that particular, you know, anytime I think about like the actual details, like, you know, what that looked like, just Ashlyn saying, you know, Tylee didn't want to be alone, like that really pulled at the heartstrings, you know, because she was just like, especially when you think of it in terms of this is a 16-year-old driving interstate by herself, trying to keep up with her mom, who was probably driving like a bat out of hell, because, you know, if she died in a car accident, that would save them the hassle. But you know, I think it's pretty cheap for her to call them as witnesses. Yeah, and yeah, and Tylee and Bishop, they weren't even they weren't even close at the time of her death. So I don't want to share too many details, but yeah, so it just, I don't know. Like nothing should surprise me, but I'm like, yeah, so these young women haven't suffered enough. And now you're going to, because anytime someone testifies, it just starts the whole circus. You have like these true crime groups trying to dig into their lives, reporters, like my kids were getting calls from reporters who were trying to get a hold of me because I wasn't answering their calls and stuff. So it gets really, really invasive. And now they're adults, so I just don't think that, I think these reporters are going to do anything they can to get whatever story they can. So that, that bothered me a lot. But yeah, and especially because it's like, well, what testimony are they going to give that, like, that you didn't plan the murder of your husband or that you weren't involved in it? What is she going to do? Say, remember that time you came over and I was baking cookies? Like, like it's just weird. But I think, knowing Lori, if past is prologue, she's going to try to, remind them of good times. Like she might be trying to humanize herself just by having some of Tylee's, friends testify. I don't know. But also, just because someone's listed as a witness, sometimes they don't actually call the witness. I do know of at least one person who was told that they would be called as a witness, in Lori's trial, and they weren't actually two people. Okay. Barb Murray, is Tylee's medical issues as severe as Lori said it was? I don't know. I mean, well, she was fine when I was there. Like, she was a night owl. She stayed up really late and then got up late. But, she certainly wasn't like in pain or, so, oh, excuse me. But I talked about that a little bit in the last live, the Q&A, and that I do wonder if her pancreatitis was more the result of Munchausen's by proxy, because Lori does seem to be, not that I have any training, to diagnose people with any kind of personality disorders or mental illness, and she does seem to have that profile. So who knows? I mean, even, when she was like talking to Colby, trying to butter him up, like, you're the only one who cared. You're the only one you knew when, she was in the hospital and so sick and all this stuff. And I don't know. I just question. I mentioned in the last live, I mentioned this before, that Joe had complained in a legal filing that he believed Lori was drugging Tylee, because the first night of visitation, like, he would pick her up in the afternoon and she would just sleep. So he felt like he really didn't get like the full 2.5 days. Do you know why Melani didn't testify after called at Lori's trial? Yeah, she said she had viewed testimony, and so that like disqualified her. But I imagine with Chad's trial, they probably told her, like, don't try that again. Like, you're gonna spend some time in jail if you do that. But she had said trying to remember where I saw this. It was in the FOIA docs. But she had, um, no, I think it was Ian reporting that she had said that she would die or go to prison before testifying against Lori or Chad. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not a flex. You were afraid to testify because you know how much they had on you, because you were all planning, I believe, the death of Brandon. So how could she testify against them? I think that's why she pulled the trick that she did the first time. But yeah, so and I think that her trial is going to be tough. I mean, I'm glad they're having a trial, but I'm like, how are they going to show any kind of due diligence? Like, the defense is going to have a heyday, with that trial. Like, you only interviewed her once, and this and that, and all this stuff. Like, clearly no one was concerned that that she helped plan the murder of her husband. And they're also going to use Brandon's own words against him, I would imagine, because he had said in the initial interview where he was on body cam that he didn't think his wife was behind it, which, I mean, that stands to reason. Like, you're in shock, like but I think, when you take a step back and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I think I need to, rethink that. Are the witnesses on Lori's defense the same as the prosecution? It seems odd that the entire Cox family is on Lori's list. So, I mean, like, you can be called as a witness. Again, I have no training as a lawyer, but from what I've seen, you can be called as a witness for, well, all right, well, let me back up. If you're called as a witness for one side, then the other side still gets to cross-examine you. So both sides get a shot at you. But but you can also be called as a witness and be a hostile witness, So yeah. And to my knowledge, I don't think the state has revealed their witness list. And Idaho didn't. We got the witness list, excuse me, for Chad's preliminary trial in August 2020, but for the actual trials, we didn't get a witness list. Ginger Snaps, hey, said, you say they wouldn't have done it alone, but hadn't Lori and Alex already done things to people before? Yeah, but it was Alex and Lori. Like, I don't really see, but that said, like, no, and first of all, what I didn't say was that they wouldn't murder alone. I don't think that they would have been able to do like this spree of murders and attempted murders alone. I think they needed the support of the other person. I do wonder if Chad has killed before, even with his like, oh, I use these death percentages to predict the death of my neighbor and my friend's wife and stuff. But yeah, so and I've said this before, even earlier tonight. I think part of what they connected over was a shared penchant for murder, so yeah, it's yeah. uh Okay. Yeah, someone is in the chat saying Charles wasn't involved in Joe's demise. Joe's death was from natural causes per ME. I've already addressed this. The ME only did an external examination. So, according to another ME who I was on a podcast with, we were talking before the actual podcast started. He said if the ME didn't open him up, then he shouldn't have ruled the cause of death. It should have been at most unknown or undecided, something like that. So the ME's report is, and that is, in my opinion, completely unreliable. But also, and I've talked about this before, and this is a trigger warning just because this is going to be particularly graphic. When I got the pictures from the welfare check that they did when they found Joe's body, Lori had already told me that the mattress was saturated. Like, she said something to the effect it was like halfway through with blood. And so I was, like when all of this happened, because she told me that the apartment still smelled like dead body, and that there were 2 detectives who let her and Tylee in, and the one detective told her like the state of the mattress. And again, this was at the time, it was just like, yeah, it was just so strange. Like, why would but wasn't a detective, a police officer. She might not have said detective, but it was a minimum 2 police officers. But like, why would a police officer say that in front of the decedent's daughter, or his teen daughter? So it was bizarre. But when I looked at the pictures from the welfare check, you could see the first however many pictures, there wasn't a lot of blood in the mattress. And then it looks like when they tried to move his body, probably from, the state of decomposition. And Dr. Salerno had said, I had said originally that Joe Ryan was moderately decomposed. And she said, but having looked back over the ME's report, I would correct that and say, I would say he was profoundly decomposed. And so I suspect what happened was when they moved his body just like basically, I don't know, imploded, or like, because she talked about like skin slippage and stuff. So it just looks like they moved it and a lot of blood escaped. So I suspect the ME, got this body bag and was like, no one is asking about this guy. No one's breathing down my back. I'm just going to push this through. Again, I don't know. I should research to see if it's true that, if an ME doesn't do an internal exam, if they should rule the cause of death. But, but yeah, at this point, again, they deserve no benefit of the doubt. I did a lengthy live on all of the suspicious things in his apartment. And I will say this, it looks like he had just moved to Phoenix. Like, he hadn't set up his cable box yet. The modem box was sitting out. His bank stuff like that you get from a bank when you first sign up for an account, that was on the office floor. I mean, there were all of these indicators that like it looks like he had just moved in just days before he died. So I suspect that Lori lured him to move back to Phoenix under the guise of reconnecting with Tylee. And I also suspect that Joe thought that he and Tylee were going on a trip because he was packing a suitcase and he had girls' stuff. He had a girl's backpack. He had a girl's, whatever those like string bags are, not a backpack. He had a girl's iPad cover. He had, it was like this bag with like the strings. I'm not calling it the right thing. But it was like pink, green, orange hearts all over it. A girl's iPad cover, and blocks that spelled dad. They were all like by the stuff that he was packing. So yeah, and then there was a pair of women's sunglasses on the bathroom counter. He had just activated a bottle of hair dye, but didn't use it because in the ME's report it noted that he had brown and gray hair and a beard. So yeah, I just, yeah. Okay. Dr. Von Decay, hey, said, I find it interesting that they are taking Lori's prints on the 18th, DNA, etc. If convicted, running them through the state databases to see if she has committed other crimes. Yeah, I found that interesting too. But also I was like, how do they not already have that? Like, she's been incarcerated for 5 years, so I don't, yeah, that part was, it was cool, but also a little strange, because I do wonder with some of these things, how much, I don't know, they might like be playing to their audience a little bit, but yeah. Give people hope. Oh, maybe they'll go after Melanie. Maybe they'll go after her for, her role in Joe's death. Maybe they'll find other things. But yeah, I don't know. All right. I am spent. I'm going to call it a night. But yeah, thank you for hanging as long as you have. Sorry, the topic was so difficult, but I will conclude with this. Chad is every bit as guilty as Lori. He wasn't just psychopathic. He was a coward, because all the evidence points to, he knew this was wrong. He knew what he was doing was wrong. And I'm sure he probably, on a nearly daily basis, if not daily, rehearses those different key interactions where he was probably so close. Like, no, you're right. You deserve better. Just forget me, and probably wishes he had done that, because if he had done that when they had that big fight on August 11th, they'd probably both be walking free. And he could have spent the rest of his life figuring out what went wrong in his own mind and heart, that he was ever seduced by Lori. But after having taken this deep dive, I mean, I respect if people, still believe that like Lori was like this happy-go-lucky, really caring mom until she met Chad Daybell. And then she, being this happy housewife, was led down the primrose path by Chad Daybell. I mean, if anyone was led by anyone else, now I am absolutely convinced it was Chad by Lori. So they're still equally culpable, and they're, neither, I do not believe either of them will spend a single day outside of prison. I don't think Lori's going to be in Dancing with the Stars. But it is it's a cautionary tale, just to see, how this whole process transpired. Anyway, all right. On that note, have a good night.